Merchandise. I'm welcoming you to a panel about society in change, what is privacy, and where is it taking us. We have four women, excellent women that I may present to you. Christina Beran is a clinical psychologist and more specializations in psychology. And she's going to give us an overview into this kind of topic. Katharina Larisch is a doctor, medical doctor, an economist, and she is working on keeping people healthier. And Teresa Handrick is an author. She is well known for her approach to have a wiki for everyone, to make it possible for women and non-binary persons to become more visible on the German Wikipedia. And she's an author. And finally, last but not least, Claudia Zatzmann-Kocht is also an author and a podcaster, and she is an activist. And I'm handing over to Claudia. Thank you. I'm very happy to be here. I'm here with three more wonderful women together. And the topic of today's panel is about the motto of this year's Privacy Week. And I have my angel shirt. What's a system, and what is relevant, and what is relevance, and how is changing that at the moment? What do we declare to be relevant in our society? A short example for the kickoff before 9/11. Like wholesale surveillance was not really a relevant topic for societies. After 9/11, this changed, and I remember a tweet somebody wrote many years ago. If you saw somebody running at a train station on the platform, you thought, oh, hopefully they will catch their train. But nowadays you have different thoughts. So 9/11 isn't that long ago, but it changed our society in a very specific way, in a very and this changed our society to surveillance capitalism. And so this is only one example where this will lead us in our discussion today. Let's start with the question, Christina. You might enjoy this question. So what is the system we're living in? That's a very big question. We're using system in everyday language, but you can recognize the system by noticing that it has borders. And if you're nothing inside the system, you know that too. Where my interests lie, and having fun with is looking at humans integrate into a system of working. How do they participate in a system? And that has changed significantly over the years. And so there is change, but I'm also noticing there's breaks. So we need to distinguish, is this kind of a continuous development, or is it a break and you're investing into solutions for a system that doesn't really exist anymore? So, for example, the way our working society and the work in our society happens. And so we have multiple societies in parallel, and so looking into the differences, that is very interesting to me. So we don't have just one system, we have many systems in parallel. Yes, in parallel, overlapping, more or less distinct. But the question is who takes part in what system? So would you say that the health system is a part of that, or is that also a system of systems? So every system has rules, and if we have a single system, the system has a goal, and I can check if I'm part of the system by comparing the goals or verifying the goal. And if I'm investing into that system, if that is going into the correct direction. Let me hand this question directly over to Katharina. How would you describe what has happened in 2020? What has come into focus, the health system, with air quotes? How would you describe it? What has been said? A system needs a goal, and in the health system, we do not necessarily have goals that can be brought together. So in a big hospital that is privately owned, one of the goals is to increase revenue, and then on the other hand, we have individuals that want to become healthy again, and one of the problems is that there is different ways of treating a person, and they might have certain benefits, but if it's not profitable, it's not being offered. So my goals as an individual to become healthy is in conflict with certain parts of these hospitals. And that's why I also studied economics, to look into exactly these kinds of conflicts. And it all boils down to money. What can we afford? What can we not afford? And what do we want to afford? As a society, we need to define what we want. So in England, this has been done. In Germany, not so much. So I would like to open up the scope of our system here. So you're writing books, science fiction stories about robot ethics. So systems play an important role there, but this also plays a large part in how we as individuals and as a society want to live. I find it very interesting, the question that you asked at the very beginning, what is a system? And Very interesting. I would have answered that question quite differently. Of course, in the health system, I know whether I'm in or out. Either I'm a member or not. But for me, systems are much broader. Foster Wallace wrote an essay about This Is Water, about a talk he's given that and made into an essay, and two fish are swimming in the water, and an older fish comes by and says, "So how's the water today?" And so one of the young fishes asked the other one, "What actually is water?" So that is very much what I think of as a system. At many points, you don't even realize that you're inside a system. For example, I'm a German. I'm part of a health system, but I find it very interesting which systems we're actually part of, and which if you ask a random person in the street, like what is a health system, they might answer that they are a member of a health insurer, and if they get sick, they get treated. But so people really think that their very individual view of the system or the few systems is the system as a general. And if you want to look at what the reality really is, then you need to take a step back and look at the entirety. So two of you are nodding. So reflection is a good asset. As a psychologist, as a psychologist in Vienna, I have a psychoanalytic history, of course. So you start interpreting this unconscious being as a system. Only when you look at it from the outside, you start this process of reflection. If you like wake me up at 3 a.m, so I wouldn't really be able to be reflective and just turn over and continue sleeping. So I look at things from a psychological perspective. So talking about systems is a helpful way to reduce complexity. So Heidegger has worked a lot inputs, and so a system can be helpful to reduce complexity with its routines. But this, I really like this image of fish in water. Katharina, you also nodded. What I find very interesting is the comparison of systems and looking at how others do it and what gets put into the system and what's the outcome and what is working where. Some things only work in certain countries. So the Swedes are slightly more disciplined than we are, and it might not work in Berlin. So the question is that a different system because the people are different? And the question is, what was first, the system or the humans? The chicken and egg problem. So look at the English, for example. They really love their health system, and it's one of the greatest things in existence. And Americans, for example, they hate this socialism and communism that has to be fought. So we also have a dependency on systems looking at systems in society as an overarching system. So society is a system as well, and has structures and hierarchies. And these different rules, for example, in the health system in Sweden is completely different, and it works differently from the US system. And people engage differently with it. And if I can step out of that, I can be reflective about it, and I can have a much different relationship to the system than if you're inside the system. So I'm just curious. Quickly back to Christina. So normally, we're not really conscious about in which systems we're living in. So we're living relatively intuitively, where we're exchanging information and interacting with systems, but not necessarily intuitively. Like bureaucracies can be quite non-intuitive. So let me ask you: do you think that humans get to this point where they start this reflective process? So reflection is definitely more work than being non-reflective, and I think it's how you feel that day, and it definitely differs from person to person. So, Teresa, you probably have a lot to do with reflection, don't you?
So I suppose you have some other access about reflection and about systems. Yeah, I think so. But it has been a learning process for me as well. So I realized now to talk about something, so as how it works as an author. So I wanted to write a novel about which is very close to my life, and then I thought it totally didn't work out, and I thought, why does it? But it didn't work for me, and so it was why, because it was my life. So why didn't it work out for me? Why couldn't I write about my life? And then suddenly I understood that. The characters in there were just like how I saw the characters, how I saw people I met, and so I also saw them like in 2D because it's only my impression of those people, but I have to because that was my reality, and suddenly I had to create those creatures from the inside, those people, and not just from the outside. So, and only that way you can create a character that's like really tangible for readers. Because when I start thinking about would I just make up characters, I have to really think out each character anyway. But when I'm doing reality, that is much harder because suddenly it's only my reality. So, and this says there's a saying about authors, so too much reality really hurts the book. So you have to go one step back and look into the characters and let them interact. And if you do that, and still look at people who actually existed, suddenly you quote unquote understand those people more because you just did the work to look into those people. And it's actually something that helps me to communicate with people day to day, because suddenly I can just step back and think about how would I look into a character, a person, when I talk about someone whose argument first I don't understand, and suddenly then it makes it easier. Okay, so Christina is really like nodding. Yeah, I agree, totally agree, because that's a psychological process that I really like, which is described here. And so empathy and how to look into someone else, it's very important in any system you're in. So in the whole society, and I would have liked to have much more of this empathy and thinking into someone else, and how you describe these characters get like their own life, and and then suddenly you can start doing this with people you really interact with, so that really actually helps and gives you insight into how other people think. I can really, I really appreciate that, and I can totally, I can also, yeah, that really realism and books don't work out that well. And maybe to go one step further into talking about relevance. Now we talked a lot about systems and the scope of what systems can mean. Now let's talk about what is relevance, and what we as society think relevant is relevant, and why we do it. As it's 2020, I'll let Katharina talk, because now health is very important in 2020, like psychological health, and of course also bodily health, and also but reflection, which is also done by books. So it's really very fitting for this year, all these topics. Okay, so Catherine, about relevance. Okay, well, so we have there a lot of like obvious examples this year, right? Well, you see, of course. So we just lived through it. So I can say it was here in Germany that way. I suppose it was in Austria similar. You can suddenly you see that certain people, certain jobs are very important, and that life isn't possible without them. And suddenly they were like cheered and applauded. And the same jobs, they were not applauded before, and now suddenly in the last weeks in Germany, they dare to state that they are relevant, and that maybe you should actually pay for them adequately, and they went on strike. And then suddenly we said, oh, how dare they to strike? It's such a hard time, because if kindergarten teachers now strike, that's a catastrophe. Well, so first they become heroes and heroines, and now how dare they not to work in kindergartens, because they're so important now. I personally think it's very impressive that they still are working now, because what they are facing and with Corona, that's really hard. So I don't know how this will continue. So there have been some agreements that they will get more money, but I'm very curious about how this is going to work out. And I think this can be very quickly forgotten, and I think this will be forgotten very quickly, so that first, just clerks were very important, and well, now suddenly, like shop clerks are now like spit on and screamed at when they try to tell people that they should wear masks. And I think this will be quickly forgotten again, that they had to fight on the forefront against this pandemic by telling customers you have to wear masks and stuff like that. And they have a lot of more work to do, because they have to disinfect all the stuff. So there's much more work when just running a shop than it was before, but they don't get any more money, which I think is difficult. Let's put it that way. There's been another talk I've heard that was you talked about that, and you said what is relevant for society is always at lower level of society. Yeah, I read a nice book which said in Ireland, I think, the bank clerks wanted to have more money, and then they went on strike. So, and for half a year, no one was interested that they went on strike. But on the other side, if like garbage deposit striked for 2 days, suddenly the whole city is just drowning in garbage. So there you see a difference. So the problem of these people, which we consider to be relevant now, is a very specific kind of human right now, especially those who work in healthcare. So it's a bit like Florence Nightingale and Albert Schweitzer is in all of us. And yes, of course, we want to strike. But on the other hand, you clearly say this is not possible to strike now because there are people who depend on me and I can't strike. Because, just to say very plainly, I can't let people just lie in their shit. On the other hand, if I go to metal workers, where just like the work isn't done, or like bus drivers, they may like strike for 1 day, but in healthcare striking is really difficult, and people usually don't strike there because people should say it's not possible. I would like to add the book is Utopia for Realists by Uke Brinkman, I think. That was the book. It was a great book, exactly. That's what I meant, because it really shows what is relevance. So my job, and I do work medicine. So I see from like small kiosk keepers to like parliament people, I see everyone. And when people tell me who they think is relevant and why, so there's a very, and some places there's a real misunderstanding for what's relevant. And I personally think that there is a lot of politicians and stuff like that, and institutions which we could easily live without 2 weeks. But if suddenly there's no food or no shop clerks, that would be very hard for even 2 days. Okay, yeah, Christina is nodding constantly. Yeah, because this brings me back from the meta level. It changed. If everything changes, it shows different things, and the crisis, of course, changes a lot, and so we see that the system is changing, and we also see that and many things get very transparent now. So an X-ray through it. I'm also a psychologist for work situations, and I can think of a lot of situations what is very difficult. Like, for example, home office. It's really a mixed bag. So I know that I had companies which really didn't like home office, and they thought, because work is only the thing which happens when you are at the desk. So I think this is really like on sitting on desk and like having your suit on, and so and not this ridiculous stuff, which actually there's a lot of social stuff going on. And when employees, this picture that employees don't work when they're not seen by their executives. But on the other hand, there have been a lot of companies which quickly provided the equipment for people to do home office, and which really changed quickly and made that easy. And a lot of studies actually show that people work more in home office. It's not these companies once. So it's important that this shows us that people will work at home. So now we can see that home office is possible, and that it's doable, and it can be, but it's really a huge change. It's really like a break. It's something that really changed a lot, because before that people said, you're doing home office, so usually you don't do anything. Oh yeah. And today, suddenly it's, oh wow, you do home office. Wow, it's great that you can do home office. So this really changed very quickly structurally, and it's not just development. It's really a break. But I'd be interested to see how this plays out in other countries. So in Germany, if you want to advance in your job, you have to at least be 20 hours at the office. So if you're there, this shows your engagement. In Scandinavia, it's the other thing, because if you're after 5 p.m. in the office, you're just a loser, because obviously you're very badly organized. Okay. Okay. So suddenly, now you have home office, and so in the Scandinavia, people think that home office is a good thing, and you don't have to do over hours, because, yeah, and trust. The question about trust has really changed heavily. A psychological connection between employer and employees. And this is important, that employers, on the other hand, if you look at like spyware, which wants to measure how much you work, and which is also now applied more constantly. But isn't that forbidden still? Yeah, but no one cares about if it's forbidden or not. So a lot of stuff is not actually allowed, but it's still used. So I'm just interested in how this will develop. And, for those listening and watching us, you can also send us questions during the panel. So this can be done via Mastodon and Twitter using the hashtags PW20 and PW20 online. And so we have people watching those hashtags for questions. And on the streaming website, you will always have see a button where you can find to send us questions directly and anonymously. Yeah. Okay, no, so
it is currently only visible via Media CCC.
Okay, also für die Deutsch. Sie sagt jetzt kurz, dass die Übersetzung noch nicht auf allen Streaming-Seiten verfügbar ist. Okay, so small, short information for those who are listening and watching us. I think it's very interesting to see where we got after this. So first, we see what do we declare as relevant in society. So the reason do you want to say something else? Yeah. About Rutger Bregman, I said good books, Utopia for Realists, and very interesting about relevance. So talking about like kindergarten teachers, people in healthcare, people doing garbage collection. So 2 days ago, a German band was in the studio called the Ärzte, and they talked about all the artists and people in like and people say, yeah, artists, it's nice, but that's not relevant. And on the one side, you can say, well, yeah, that's true, because if I write my book now or tomorrow, actually, it's irrelevant. On the other hand, if we think about how many stories and like music and like just art we consume daily, be it games, streaming, books, whatever, but that's work by people who are actually usually called artists, and those were like totally let down during the pandemic. So here in Bavaria, you got something for 3 months, but then you really had to give them every bit of information about yourself. Now the president, the government promised something more in Bavaria, but that's really interesting to see. So what does relevance mean? So is it relevant now? Is it relevant tomorrow? Is it relevant in 1 year? So looking at artists, it may be like it's their work is relevant after Corona or COVID and not now. So we're still hoping that the new reality will change back to old reality, and we can go to theater and concerts and stuff, whatever. But if during that period, half of all the all this artist stuff just dies and goes bankrupt, we will have much fewer of those very interesting small artists which do a lot of interesting stuff, because I mean they didn't have an easy life before the pandemic. So like 80% of book authors in Germany can't live from that. So usually they do it as a hobby, and people and publishers tell you, oh yeah, you are allowed to publish that stuff with us. So it's a very strange culture we have here in Germany, the country of yeah. So just to compare this with music and talk about well, who in the art earns what, and usually you just get what people have to do as hobbies because they don't have more time to do that. And also that's a question about not change but break. So what is the kind of society we want to come out of after this pandemic? Do we want to be 2019 2.0, or we have the possibility to like change where the money goes? So maybe it's not Lufthansa next time which gets 9 billions, but maybe it's like smaller people and artists who get this, and who don't like and don't torture them with small stuff, like also like invest into air cleaners in schools. So that will cost 1 billion euros, because then we could keep schools open easily or like with much less danger. But you need to invest money, but it's too expensive for the communities, and so they don't do it. And I think this is very difficult. So I'm really with you. I think art is very important, especially now. If we wouldn't have music, it would be very hard to do. And I work on this to work on hygiene concepts to like make concerts possible here in Berlin. But it's really important for people to be able to go somewhere and listen to music. It was easier in summer than it has been yet. But I think it's relevant. For example, I think children are very important, and children are really like totally ignored. So people talk a lot about children, but they don't really do anything about them. So if we now create a lost generation, that's I think that's very difficult. A lost generation. I have 2 children, one in the first and one in the 3rd year, and let's say until now it's okay. But I'm in home office all the time, so I take care about them. That just works because I'm at home. The problem is that our schooling system at the beginning was actually a problem.
So it's basically the same system as it was before. The children of academic people, they will study. Those of non-academic people will not study. And now in the current pandemic, it's just getting worse, and so it's just getting more extreme, more of the same, but more extreme. So it's extremely bad. And I'm just too much of an optimist to say that we will have a lost generation, because technically it's just COVID. We are not all living in Moria. So that's really a lost generation. So my children, they still have school, and they just have thicker clothing because it's just getting cold, so it's a small problem. But if I hear from you that it's just only $1 billion, then they can go back to schools, well, let's do it, please. And your kids, one has to say, are in Bavaria, and I'm now in Berlin. I used to be in Bavaria, and there is worlds between that. So children in Bavarian schools can see themselves as lucky. And yeah, I think that's really bad, because in Bavaria, I don't see it as perfectly. It's okay, yeah, but they could improve it. Yeah, but what's also relevant, what really is important, what I can see is a lot of people trying to do something for many months now, but they never take a step back and just check what should be done. So yeah, people closed the borders, and now everyone within Germany, everyone is the biggest and does something and does the best things, but nobody takes a step back and checks what is our long-term plan, what will we do? And most importantly, the question, how did it get so far? Because it's not like a higher power punishment, because viruses were always there and they're gonna get more, and the situation we're in, there's a reason for it. So we are always going further into nature and cornering it ever more. And the more space we are covering as humans, and the worse the climate catastrophe is getting, the more insects are coming from the tropical areas to us, the more pandemics we will see. So we are always focusing on COVID now, and then we'll have a vaccine, and then we'll solve it. But that's not the case. And I would also like to add that everything coming from global warming and coming from the pole caps, from the ice. So there is a lot of stuff coming. Viruses that we haven't seen in a very long time, that's gonna be very dangerous for us. And we were freeing that from the ice. We are melting the ice. So the next 4 to 6 years, that will be a few waves of new dangers, and everyone will say, "Whoa, how did that happen?" Yeah, and now just saying we have this one virus and bacteria that are resistant to all our antibiotics, most of that happened because we made it this way, and nobody is focusing on how did that happen in the first place. Everyone is now looking for a vaccine, but nobody's really looking at the sources of that. And probably we can't just stop global warming, but we really have to focus on it not being a China virus or something, but that it's our own fault. Yeah, I also want to say that a crisis for an individual has more phases. And first is chaos. There's a lot of reactions. Some are playful with the situations, and many will try to get it back to what it was before. And easily said, we want to have the old normal back. And we are in a crisis right now. You can do what you want, and you don't always have the peace and quiet to reflect and take a step back. There are different priorities. And the first priority is to stabilize the situation so survival can happen. And you can see that sometimes everything now goes into the health system just to stabilize the situation so survival is taking place. That's taking priority, and that's how we work. And that's happening in individuals, but you can actually say that the whole system is behaving in a very similar fashion. I also said that it's like a magnifying glass. So a lot of topics are now coming up and seeing the light of day. And if you see how the crisis is happening, how it's developing, it's not easily solvable. And yeah, we have to do more science is needed, definitely, and more research. And it is a good opportunity, but I think none of us is really far enough, or the people making decisions are not far enough to really do analysis right now. Well, if I can talk about that now. Well, a few days ago in the EU Commission, or in the EU, there were the agrarian planning, And we might have thought that's now the topic, but they didn't really manage anything good, and I really am clueless now, because I don't want to say the old white people, but actually they are kind of old, and they should know about climate change and about the pandemic now, and they have to know how all this intensive harvesting is damaging all of us, but they still vote as if nothing bad had happened. And that's weird to me. Yeah, and as an individual, you have to say, well, shit, that's how it is. And then actually there is no development anymore, and that's just how it is. That's a step an individual has to take. And I also wanted to say something for a culture. There are some basic needs humans have. So once we live better, that's also good for evolution. And security is and safety is a very important thing. And that's also well established neurochemically. There is a need for exploration and for the new and for the funny thing, and we cannot just ignore that, just as we cannot ignore the need for security and for safety. And if now someone is cut off from their favorite music, if you can't put your headphones in, that does something to you. And it has an important function for us. And I might sound very Vienna right now, but it does something to your soul. It's a very important thing. That's something I wanted to have said. Yeah, I totally agree. I think what the people are now, and what the people got from the first wave is music, is streaming, is spontaneous readings online and spontaneous concerts, and where people just were doing something from their kitchen table or consuming from the kitchen table spontaneously, and that really helped and caught a lot of people. And I also read a blog post, where do we need them for? But actually that's for bringing us through the pandemic. That's what we need them for. And that's why I would really make that a point of relevance. Yeah, and nowadays you don't sit in front of your TV, but you sit in front of your laptop and watch Netflix. And for that time that you can invest into that, you are in another world. And whilst you are there, you're feeling different. I also have a different question. Maybe more for the future or about the future. I think we are almost there already anyways. What would we as a society declare as relevant to actually develop to a better state as a whole? How do we get there best? Well, then I start. So I believe, and I'm saying it on Twitter a lot, so I am writing a utopia. Because it's not that simple, it takes a while. The problem is that for the first time in our history as humans, we face a problem that actually targets all of us. And because we are limited humans, we didn't manage to solve this problem. And as humans, we have to understand that we are part of a system where we all take part in, and we all have to take responsibility. And probably with a generation, so 30 years distance, we will realize that maybe less. And this realization, it has to come to all of us, because then we will be able to actually act as humans and do things that are not popular. The nicest example for us in Germany is now find a resting place for nuclear waste. And now finally we found that Gorleben is not working out where we wanted. And now possibly Landshut in Bavaria is a candidate, but the politicians of the strongest party in Bavaria, they say, no, that's not possible. It's a very beautiful countryside. That can't be used for that. But actually, who was all for nuclear power? So if we wanted the nuclear power, then we also have the nuclear waste. And that connection that has to be made. And we as humans have to learn how to make those connections. And if we can't do that, then there will be no future. This civilization will have no future. Because then there will be a very strong loser, or very extreme losers, and a lot of refugees and wars, and this planet will change a lot. And I don't want to imagine that, because that's too heavy for me. So I'm saying, people, we will have to get that, and maybe next year, that would be nice. I don't know. I ask myself for some time now. I'm trying to write a book for some time now, and I think November, December might be the right time, because I notice what is getting lost is the empathy and the setting yourself in someone else's shoes. And a good connection to yourself, actually. Because, interestingly, you need less than you think. The quality is a very important topic. And cheesy, you could say self-love, but you're not saying that, because you're not saying something like that. But being close to yourself. And also be able to put yourself in someone else's shoes. And so empathy, and empathy for other people, empathy for yourself. If people were practicing that more often, life could be better. So I'm not certain how to go on. I think we have two directions. So on the one hand, we have economy and money, and the question, who profited from the crisis? Is it just the people who sit in California and make a lot of money using digital services like Google and others, who also, of course, try to make new products and influence laws? And on the other side, what I'm discovering now more and more, there's a lot of people who are ready to do good things and work for the good, for the greater good, without payment. And now there was a big hackathon done by the German government against the virus, so us against the virus. And via that, I saw a worldwide network of scientists who tried to develop corona tests or COVID tests under $1, below $1. And what can be done, what's not patented anymore, and how could we do that together? And there's people from Germany, from Switzerland, from the US, from Sri Lanka, so worldwide. And they say, yeah, we really need these things. We need things that the health systems from poor countries cannot solve on their own. And there are hackerspaces in Berlin, or there's one of them in Berlin, that tries to generate new medical devices that are easily and cheaply made and cheaply repaired, so they can be used in poorer countries. And if I'm allowed to call it good persondom or goody, that exists. But on the other side, capital is still important and money is still important. And if I look at our politicians, there are some who really want to become more important. And for them, money is the only thing that counts, to say it carefully. And everything else is not important. And as a society, we have to decide what's important to us. And at the end, the elections will show it. Well, how would the world look if a nurse would earn twice as much as a Formula One driver? That would be interesting. How do we direct things? Yeah, I was working in explaining things to companies, and I would say we have way too many people who explain how to make roads, and we need more people making roads. So we have a question now. So this is a remember. Wait. So this is a small reminder that the translations are working, but if you can hear this, you already know that. About the topic art. Thank you, Christina, for also mentioning it again, because I find it very important that right now during the pandemic, art is very important for psychic hygiene, and the pandemic is a very large burden for the psyche, and all the social contacts, they just break away, and that is relevant and important to still have that in some capacity. That brings me to a question. We were talking to the problem in general, and also special jobs within the system that are considered system relevant or systemically relevant. So there was a short mention of Moria, and today is the Intersex Awareness Day, where it's about visibility and the rights of intersexual people, and especially in Austria, there's the topic, just as it is in Germany, a third gender, and just accepting that legally. But what was also getting awareness in the last months is Black Lives Matter, and how people, persons of color are treated, and also about the masks, where a black person was very badly treated because they were not wearing a mask, but white persons are just handled differently. How is racism part of this? How does it play into the systemically relevance or system relevance? So I see 3 messages right now. Oh, 3 clueless faces. So yeah, I would say it's a horrible thing. We just have to look at Moria, and our politicians don't really care. They celebrate themselves for taking in 500 teenagers, and that's just rubbish. We have plenty of space, we have plenty of money, but that doesn't happen because they're not white enough. And that's a huge problem. Just like social profiling, and there is a study that should be done about the police, but nope, not happening because it's not allowed. So I think it very nice that the Black Lives Matter movement got stronger, but unfortunately it got drowned out again by the second election wave. And normally you should go you take to the streets every day, but of course with the pandemic that's not possible either. But I think it's a great thing that this gets more public awareness, and we have to stick to it. And feminism, it's the same thing. So you always have to stick to it. You have to keep working on it, and you always have the idea, yeah, it's getting better. You don't have to be as loud anymore, but no, it's only getting better because we are loud. And so we should keep working on this. We should really keep working on the rights of marginalized groups, and then it might get better. But yeah, during the pandemic, it got worse. Who's dying? The people of color. They are dying a lot more than white people. And who keeps working with the children? Yeah. Yeah, so we managed to improve a lot, but a lot also got worse again during the pandemic, or at least it made that more visible.
Okay. Another question from the audience about relevance. If this is really can be defined for all humans in general, because for some relevance, maybe like the local peer group, for others it won't. So can you actually define relevancy in any like general terms? Well, in general, I also think it's very difficult to define this. However, when we are here together, there is some like base ethics which we will be able to like agree on. And this may also be like see how similar we are and what connects us, but when we have this talk with other people at another place at another time, this will change. So the results will change. Yeah. And we also have the difference between personal relevance and society relevance. So where it's really about groups. And this is really where we get to the topics, Rhonda, you just talked about. Thanks for that. Where we come to this distinction, who and they, we and the others. So one group and all the others are not part of this group, where you say, okay, so this is our small system and that's the rest. And this is when it's just about principles, basic principles, where it's just about that, where we really have to do like hard, borders. So this is what we are, and these are the others, which we don't want because they disturb our systems, because they like destroy our small, nice world. And this is where it gets problematic always. And that's exactly like the breaking point where we have to really watch very closely what agendas are pushed in this direction. And this is where we time and again see the problems in small and big societies, groups, and countries which split those groups. Yeah. Okay. I think this is approximately a bit like an answer, and we can find an end to this talk. But on the streaming website of the ParivacyWeek, there will be a link to the launch. So we will try to be there available for question and discussion. Next talk, or let's say the next session, starts at 19:30, also 7:30 p.m. and it will be a film that's shown. So thanks to you all. Okay, Claudia, yeah. And one thing. And I just want to say that two of our of the people in this panel will also be during the week for other talks. At least two of our great participants. So Theresa will do on a Wednesday evening. There will be a reading of a book. Yeah, from one of her novels about robot ethics. And Christine will talk about on Thursday about work psychology and what that how did I summarize this up? Yeah, it's about a change in work society and from standard and to flexible and all the stuff we have today. So in which which society stands behind which work society and work ethics. Okay, thanks. That was much more elegant than I can formulate it. Okay, and the URL into the to the launch. You'll find it also on fahrplan.privacyweek, privacyweek.at. Yeah, you can find us there. 2 small additional hints Claudia didn't mention, which are, so these are like, Claudia herself also has 2 sessions on Saturday about 1984, passing 1984 on the right into the brave new world, and on Sunday she talks about Murderboard, where criminal stories, privacy, and security and IT security meet. Oh yeah, I forgot that. True. Thanks.